Before we attack each other and tear ourselves to shreds like a pack of maniacs, let's just open the sack first and see what's actually in it. It might not even be worth the trouble.
What do you think? I'm not sure.
Maybe.
Hi.
Okay, it's worth it.
Fight back! Fight back! Got you, homie! Fight back! Fight back!
Hi everyone, I'm the Clone, and in this video I'll be going over literally all the viable and All Shaco builds in the current meta, explain each and then rank them from best to please don't ban me. The most important takeaway from this video though is that you can build anything you want, but to be competitive there are two important things here, aka the meta. If a mythic is busted, you should go for it, and correct itemization against the enemy team, aka if the enemy has ceiling, you take Mortal Reminder, enemies full AP, you build Magic Resist. Also there are 3 items that are present in almost any AD build. The Essence River because of the synergy between Q, Backstep and Sheen, making the Essence the most popular item on Shaco, work as it melts tanks and works really well when abusing the Hell of Blades bug, and third of all is the Collector with Lord Dominic's, because armor penetration is quite busted at the moment. The conclusion is, most builds are quite similar, and it's the mythic and the enemy team that changes your playstyle. Thus I will go over why each build exists, what are its strengths and weaknesses, and how you should play with each in order to perform at max potential. Here's a list with all the builds and their respective timestamps. And as I will be both discussing about AD and AP Shaco, I would like to address the everlasting question of which is better, AD or AP, and when should I go for each? Well, the answer is quite simple. Each build and playstyle fit better in certain situations. Yet my recommendation is, if you're an AD Shaco player and feel like AP would perform better in certain matchup, you should just stick to playing AD. And the reason behind it is very simple. You want to play what you're better with, because in reality the difference between how well you play with AD when compared with AP will have a much greater impact on your in-game performance overall when compared to which build would be better for the given situation. But for the sake of the example, if you are to be just as good with both AD and AP Shaco, the way you choose which build you should play with is very simple. And to prove why it's simple, I'll have to quote Gandhi himself, who says that AD Shaco has an active playstyle while AP Shaco has a reactive playstyle, meaning that if going in yourself and controlling engagements that way will win you the game, then AD Shaco was more suited for the respective situation. While on the other hand, if controlling objectives by preparing yourself and reacting to the enemy play is the way to win, then AP Shaco was the right answer for the given situation. I hope my explanation made sense. Also, if you guys enjoy my content, don't forget to drop a like and sub so the channel will grow and I'll be able to post even more and better videos.
I forgot, don't fucking make me.
Now I will start with the most popular build, that being Duskblade into full crit.
1, 2, 3! Fight back! Fight back! Psych!
This is the most popular one because it's what the game itself recommends you should play with, but it does not mean that it's also the best build. The Duskblade lacks a lot in terms of late game scaling because of how lethality becomes worse. Also it has bad efficiency, meaning that there's a lot of emphasis on the passive. But it does have good power early game because of the item being cheap. Thus, the power spike you get from lethality and the bonus damage from its passive will let you one-shot any squishy carry. And later on, when paired with the Essence River, you'll have a bunch of ability haste. You can go in, get a kill, become invisible, 3 seconds later your Q comes back up and repeat. The idea of the build is really focused towards scaling in teamfights. The rest of the build is classic, as after Essence you get even more lethality and crit with the Collector, Lord Dominic's and Infinity Edge, enabling you to get 1k crits in your queue that can reset over and over again, especially if you go for Navori. Last tip here, do picks and be aggressive as much as you can when playing around teamfights, and end the game as fast as possible as you get outscaled. For runes, you want a classic page with Hell of Blades as the main keystone, Sudden Impact as it works well with the lethality you already have, or just use Chip Shot if you prefer more power early game. Eyeball Collection because it's easier to stack, Relentless Hunter's movement speed is really good for a jungler, while secondarily, the classic Precision with Alacrity is good for when farming and DPS, while Coup de Grace for executing enemies. Sorcery can also work if you want to scale for the late game with Absolute Focus and Gathering Storm. Or for more utility, Inspiration with Magical Footwear and Approcherino Velocerino is the way to go. And here's the build with all the optional items and runes. The next build is very similar. Prowler's Claw is much better than Duskblade when going in for single target assassinations.
What the fuck, man?
With its active, you can dash while keeping your stealth, get behind an enemy carry and one-shot them with a bonus 15% damage you get. Pro tip here, you can also dash through walls while in stealth. The only thing you should watch out for is that if said enemy was not facing you, the dash will place you in front of them. Thus, be careful not to attack them from the front and miss on the backstab crit bonus. Yet the claw lacks power against tankier enemies. Thus, just like the Duskblade, it has bad late game scaling. Every build has its advantages and disadvantages, and this build is very one-dimensional, which is both its advantage and disadvantage. If going in for one secure assassination will win you the game, then this build is perfect. But if following 1v5 in a case where you only have a 50% chance of killing the enemy carry, then there are other better builds. Either way, this build has two variations, full crit or full lethality. The crit one is classic with Essence River, Collector and Lord Dominic's, while the lethality version is more interesting. It's cheaper and includes a few really meta items like Yomus that just got buffed, while Serpent's Fang is insanely useful against enemy team comps that have a lot of shields. Edge of Night is good when needing to get out of a sticky situation, and Cyrilia's Grudge is basically the equivalent of Lord Dominic's, when instead of crit it gives CDR and a passive that's unfortunately useless on Shaco, as you already have your E slow. And if you really need more tankiness, Black Lever gives you just that on top of more armor penetration. The only problem with the lethality version is that it lacks item choices and DPS. Also, going for crit is just better in general because of the meta. Either way, here are both builds with some optional items and the classic runes. He literally revived everyone, Junga. Piece of shit.
What the fuck, man?
This next build is yet another one that features a non-crit mythic, the Eclipse Build, also regarded as the most consistent and underrated Shaco build. This build's power revolves around the fact that it has a bit of everything. It has decent burst damage with sustain, while it also has the potential to scale late game throughout its percentage armor penetration. The build starts with Dirk and Berserker's Greaves, which, as I mentioned a bazillion times before, is the strongest item combo on Shaco early game. Further, because of Eclipse's abysmal cost efficiency, the main selling point is its passive. You get both a shield and percentage damage from the enemy's health on top of a 15% movement speed boost. This item's playstyle is go in, get out. It's a hit and run kind, which works quite well on Shaco, as that's genuinely the champion's playstyle as well. There are also multiple build choices here, with the two most popular being either Essence River into Collector or Bork with Lord Dominic's. This build also used to feature Sanguine's Blade, but it got purged a few patches ago, so rest in peace, you won't be missed. Next, Navori with Infinity Age if you go for crit, or stuff like Ravenous Hydra and Death Dance if you go for sustain and utility. Optional items include Mortal Reminder against healing, Move Malmortius against AP, and a few others. This build really does have some insane ramifications. Also, because of the scaling, late game you'll be able to both one-shot carries and deal with tankier stuff. Runes, Hell of Blades with Precision works best, so you can proc both Eclipse and Bork at the same time, while melting through everything with Lord Dominic's. Speaking of melting, the Oh Mama.
Oh, mama!
This one's the daddy of Eclipse, because where you would go through armor with percentage penetration, here the Kraken Slayer says fuck all of that and instead uses true damage. This is the second build I discovered since the start of the season, and ever since I've always run back to it whenever I felt like needing to carry 1v9 as the enemy team was full of tanks and bruisers. The Kraken has a terrible power spike early game, but fucking hell if you want at least melt through the jungle with a Noon Quiver. And after you get a few items like Bork and Lord Dominic's, you're set to solo the Baron at 20 minutes if you're a bit fed, 1v1 any tank, and solo carry in teamfights with an insane DPS and sustain, especially if you go for an Avori and maybe even something like Bloodthirster. And with the Ease passive slow on basic attacks, here's what this build can do.
What the fuck, man?
The runes are the same, where Overheal instead of Coup de Grace and Legend Bloodline instead of Alacrity work quite well when going for that nasty shield lifesteal combo with Bloodthirster. And the best tip here is, because of your weak early game, focus more on objectives, split push a lot and don't be afraid of anything. While the most insane combo tactic is, use the Hail of Blades bug on the clone by ulting after activating Hail of Blades, so the clone will keep the attack speed buff permanently. Like that, especially when combined with the Ease passive, you'll be able to kite enemies like crazy while melting them. Here's the build on screen with all its ramifications and runes. Next, the most OG of OGs from Season 11, the Galeforce Build.
Nice.
This build is similar to the Kraken Slayer one, except that instead of focusing on melting tanks through DPS and sustain, you focus on one-shotting carries through crit and burst. Now, while the Galeforce is not the best Shaco Mythic anymore, it's still really solid, especially for beginners, and that's because with its active, which is similar to the Prowler's Claw, you can both go in and get out when in need, especially since this passive is easier to use, does AP damage and works well with Ease Execute. Most importantly to note here is, when you're too far away from an enemy and are about to lose the Q stealth, you can use the Galeforce to close the gap, and yes, this will break your stealth, but you can still get a backstep crit, which is what you want. The reason for why this works is, the crit bonus still applies for as long as the stealth would have lasted, regardless of whether you break it or not. This build is best when wanting to go for something that's easy to use, can one-shot carries reliably, while stacking crit with your first item, and even though its active cooldown is still really high, the build choice is still solid. Especially as the rest of this build and runes are classic, with situational items and runes like Mortal Reminder, Death Dance or Mauve Malmortius, and Sorcery as the secondary 3. And this brings us on to, that's right, the next build. Who would have thought, right? Actually, I will be talking about 4 builds at the same time, clarifying what they all have in common and why one of them is making a comeback.
What the fuck, man?
At first it was the Goredrinker that became the most OP bruiser item. Then it got nerfed and was replaced by the Stridebreaker. Then the Stridebreaker got nerfed and replaced by the Divine Sunderer. Now we're back at Goredrinker. Meta is quite a fucking spinning wheel. Anyways, these are the Mythics, while also featuring their dames, distant cousins, neighbors, dogs, sisters, boyfriends, uncles, parrot.
What the fuck, man?
Trinity Force. It's basically the backwater variant of all other 3 builds combined. It gives a little of everything except for satisfaction, as it ends up achieving nothing. And that's because it tries to do everything at once, i.e. deal with tanks, be mobile, one-shot carries, thus it ends up doing nothing well. If I were to give you guys a reference for a full build, it would be the following. Trinity into Berserkers that you can sell later for plated steel caps or mercury threads, Bork, because this build can work with Essence River as you already have the Sheen passive and thus does not stack. Bork into Titanic Hydra, Sterax Gauge cause OP meta, and fucking meme-ass item Hullbreaker, cause it also got buffed. Or if you don't like it, you can also go for Black Lever. Situational items include Deadman's Plate to be fast as fuck, boy, or Force of Nature to also be fast as fuck. Runes, they're basically the same. Unless you want to really shoot yourself in the kneecaps by going for Conqueror, in which case, good luck. Next we have the Stridebreaker build.
What the fuck, man?
Now, it got reworked and it doesn't have a dash anymore, but the item can still be played with as it has a similar playstyle and concept as the Goredrinker. Its a mythic passive gives you percentage movement speed so you can roam, you get even more movement speed when you attack, it also has decent stats and the active is really good when you want and need time to land your full combo. This mythic, unlike Trinity Force, works best with crit items, which makes the build overall more viable. Next, the Sunderer's main selling point, it's its early game power spike throughout burst damage, combined with tankiness and hella nice sustain.
Bing, bing, bang. Psych!
This item really felt like it had it all, until it got nerfed, fell out of meta and is now relatively dead. Anyways, you can still go for it if you like being tanky early game and to counter burst damage, while you yourself have a lot of it on top of sustain. And that's exactly why Goredrinker is making a comeback now, as it does all that, but better.
Oh! Fight back! Fight back! Over here, boy! Up the bubble, man!
Oh, that's hot. That's hot. Yeah.
And as the meta is shifting a bit more towards lethality, Goredrinker counters that. And especially since you yourself are an assassin, you can really counter others by playing with this shit as your first item. Also, the Goredrinker has an insane 110% cost efficiency, and its active is just really good. For the rest of the build, all I can say is classic shit. Now, here are all the Bruiser builds, and if I were to compare them, I'd say the following. Trinity is the weakest one. I'm sorry, you were the chosen one, but it seems like the game really doesn't like you. You can fuck off the screen now, so we can talk business. Now, the Stridebreaker is the weakest build on screen, but it's by no means bad. The slow you get with its passive is decent, but becomes less relevant when you check Shaco's E. The Sunderer is second here, and it's actually still strong, even stronger than Goredrinker if it weren't for the meta. Ultimately because of Goredrinker's tankiness and sustain from both stats and active that works well with the following combo, Backstab, Smite, Thirsting Slash, E, has made this the best quotation mark Bruiser build and quotation mark on Shaco, with the crit version slowly becoming the most meta popular and strongest Shaco build at the moment. Now, something I really don't want to talk about is the tank build. Yeah, fuck this build. I got ping spammed big time just for building by Miss Syndra. And I wasn't even eating yet. Thus, let's quickly go over it so we can move on to the good stuff. You have 3 mythic choices here: Turbo Champ Tank, Frostfire Gauntlet and Sunfire Aegis. All these items are similar in one way, as they give AoE burn damage and are built from Biamis. They also share the same stats except for Sunfire, which is not only more expensive but also gives more damage and resistances. First, Turbo Champ Tank is for when wanting to close the gap, which is something you really don't need as Shaco as you already have your Q. Frostfire Gauntlet slows enemies in a circle, but you don't need it either cause you already have your slow on E. Thus, Sunfire is the best as it both gives you more resistances and damage throughout burn damage on attacks. This build is a homage to the old Shaco tank, with which you could both tank and melt enemies. But what happens with this new version is, your enemies tank while you melt.
I'm dying, help me.
And I'm sorry if I sound harsh with this build, but if I have a bad experience, I'll let you guys know, because I don't want to be that one dude who's like,
Yo, check this out guys, this new crazy build is so OP.
while playing in custom games with bots. Anyways, now we want to go for Bork, Titanic Hydra, into Sterax, and it's time to 1v5, let's fucking go baby. That's not a real tank build. What? Oh boy. Fine. If you want a real tank build, here it is. But don't expect to either carry or be able to tank like a Malphite. And that's simply because Shaco's not made for that. You don't have any synergy between tank items and your abilities, thus you'll probably just die 20 times in 20 minutes. And be that one guy who's like, don't worry guys, we do be scaling late game. Anyways, these are the builds and runes. Good luck and have fun on the Rift Summoner. Finally, we can get into really good stuff.
AP Shaco support.
Wait, what?
AP Shaco support.
AP Shaco support? Fuck off, man.
The title says All Shaco Builds rank.
Oh, fine. AP Shaco support. Alright, you have really good damage on the backstab and E-combo early, thus you should abuse it. Use it with Ignite and Exhaust as your enemies will likely not expect you to pretty much one-shot them so early into the game. Ping your ADC to follow up and use these walls here to jump in with Q. Also, aggressive AD carries synergize best with his playstyle. In the mid to late game, roam like hell, especially after you get a Dirk. Also, focus on the enemy jungler by warding and invading his jungle. The build is as following, with its main premise being Spectre Cycle works if you poke your enemies constantly with E and backstabs when going in. It can be decent, but it's really reliant on the matchup as you can easily get outranged. Thus, steel shoulder guards are the more consistent choice. Just focus the cannon for that extra gold and to stack the item faster. Next, cheap lethality items are your best friends here, as you want to power spec as fast as possible. Dirk is the best starting item, which will later turn into Serpent's Fang if the enemy bot lane has lots of shields, Champung Chainsaw, man what the fuck is up with his names? Champung Chainsword if the enemy has lots of healing, Umbral Glaive to spot wards, Edge of Night if you want sustain, or Yomus as is good in general nowadays, especially again after the buff. For a Mythic you can either choose between Locket of the Iron Solari if you feel kind towards your team, or just go full greedy mode on and take Duskblade or Prowler's Claw to secure kills yourself. The Mythics are worth buying later as 4th or 5th items options. Here are the build choices and runes. Of course, for runes you still want Hail of Blades to burst the enemy AD carry early, with Inspiration second is you're playing support. Now we get into the good stuff. My favorite, one and only, the no mythic build. Now this one really does break the fucking bad. Since the guide I did a few months ago, I still love this concept and think that it's the best build out there. Not only because you power spike with every item and thus are strong at every stage of the game, but also because despite this build's name, you can actually adapt any mythic you want. If the enemy team has tanks, you just go Kraken Slayer 4th into Bork. If you want execute damage, go for Galeforce. Or when in need of sustained 1v9 solo carry, Immortal Shield Bow proved a worthy option. And an all-round option would be Eclipse, as it's really strong when both as 4th, 5th or even 6th item, especially as you'll have the mythic passives already stacked. Anyways, this build utilizes the power of Dirk and Berserkers into Essence, Collector and Lord Dominic's. Everything afterwards is situational and preferential. Optional items include Navori, Infinity Age, Mortal Reminder and a few others. 1 million IQ tip time. I've already talked about the best, fastest Shaco combo where you backstab into E into backstab, and because of the Hail of Blades attack speed, your E will only land after the second backstab, thus resulting in you getting the E execute crit. But what I haven't talked about here is you can actually reset your basic attacks with E and Q. You have a cooldown in between your attacks, thus what you want to do is immediately after attacking, use your Q behind your enemy. Like this, not only will you get a backstab with crit, but you'll also reset that cooldown between attacks. And just like that you can also use your E. That's why if you ever got one-shotted by someone early game and seemed like it was bullshit, it's probably because they were just syncing their abilities in between the cooldown of their attacks. Like this, you'll always be doing something in order to damage your enemies, thus wasting no time. Now onto AP Shaco.
What the fuck, man?
Just like before, here I will again talk about 4 builds at once, then compare them. 2 of them revolving around spamming E and burst damage, while the other 2 focus on empowering the boxes. And just like with the AD builds sharing the same legendary items, the AP builds do the same, with those being Cosmic Drive, which is the cornerstone of AP Shaco, as it gives you an insane amount of CDR, thus enabling you to spam both your boxes and E whenever necessary. This is the item that turns you from a little annoying bitch into a big ass annoying bitch. Sonias is basically good in any matchup, even when not against AD team comps, you can still easily make use of its passive to bait enemies into the boxes or dodge extremely dangerous abilities. And Void Staff will be something something that you'll want to build every game. That's because, as seen in this example, even though this item is almost 1000 gold cheaper than Rabadon's, it has more damage, and becomes even better if the enemy team builds magic resist. Now onto each build. The most popular one utilizes Liandry's burn damage to a point where after building Cosmic Drive, they will basically be able to solo camps. On top of that, with the help of Void Staff, the burn damage also melts any tank. Boots wise, you can go for both Sorcery when wanting more damage, or Lucidity for more utility and early game power. Next, Zonias is an all-round really good item, while Void Staff and Rabadons provide insane scaling. Or you could just go for Horizon Focus, an item that gives your boxes and Clone Explosion plus 10% bonus damage, which when paired with Rabadons can one-shot anything.
Scheiße, man, what is this?
The AP runes feature Dark Harvest, with everything else being the same, except for the secondary 3, where you now want to go for Sorcery because of all the late game scaling shenanigans AP Shaco is guilty of. Here is the build and runes, with the classic being an all-round good, and the second when you're really fed and don't care about utility and only want raw damage. Also, 3 optional items include Morello against healing, Demonic Embrace because of the burn damage synergy it has with Liandry's and the extra tankiness, Banshees against tons of AP, while you also get some damage, and Magi Soulstealer for when you're smurfing. Moving on to the support build now, you want to do the same stuff AP Shaco support would. Poke with E, roam a lot, prepare objectives by placing boxes on open paths, at choke points and in bushes. This build's mentality is quite simple. You want to CC enemies with your boxes while your team follows up, or you can just try to bait at all times enemies into your boxes. Also, the big difference here is Everfrost. Why is this item good? It's because of the active fitting perfectly with a support roll. You can do damage in a cone in front of you, slowing all the enemies you hit, while those in the middle of the cone are routed for 1.5 seconds, time in which you can place a box down at their feet. Now, albeit boxes get one-shotted by pretty much anything nowadays, this shit might just work once or twice in a game, and if you have a team that follows up, yeah, good luck with that. The guy who CC chained is basically fucked.
They ask you how you are, and you just have to say that you're fine when you're not really fine, but you just can't get into it.
And all of that works especially well, as with Shaco you can start a combo from stealth, surprising any enemy caught out of position. That's pretty much the whole idea with this build. Items wise, you obviously want the support item, while the rest of the build is quite similar, where you want to focus on more utility with Zonias, Morello, Cosmic Drive, Lucidity boosts, and so on and so forth. But wait, you might ask, no one plays with Everfrost on support Shaco anymore. Well, you're kinda right, it's just that I wanted to stay true to the title of the video, more or less. If you don't like Everfrost, as it's not meta anymore, Liandry's is the classic alternative. Anyways, what differs most here are the runes. You want Arcane Comet with Scorch to constantly get more damage when harassing the enemy laners, Mana Flow Band for extra mana, obviously, Transcendence because you're going for that sweet cooldown reduction monopoly, and of course, secondarily you want Inspiration with Cosmic Insight for even more cooldown reduction, and Biscuit Delivery for that sweet sustaining lane. Also for the basic runes, instead of damage only, you want cooldown reduction, then adaptive damage, and armor or magic resist depending on what you lane against. Now I will talk about both Luden's and Night Harvester builds, as they share the same concept. Also, quick shout out to my boy Mauricio for recommending me the Luden's build. I know it's been half a year since then, but hey, hashtag better late than never. Anyways, if you're playing jungle, I would really pick Night Harvester over Luden's. And that's because even though Luden's has good stats, aka it has magic penetration that enables you to delete squishes, its mana is wasted as you already have infinite regen with a jungle item. Also, Night Harvester gives you HP and more damage on its passive. And it also focuses towards ability Haste, which, as mentioned earlier, it's something that AP Shaco takes advantage of really well. On top of that, it has a better build path, where Hashtag Alternator is actually decent early when compared to Lost Chapter. Regarding the maxing order, after 3 points into your boxes, you want to focus on E, in order to take advantage of the poke damage you get with these Mythic's passives. Anyways, after either Mythic, the build is basically the same, as there aren't really that many item options when playing AP. To conclude with the AP builds, they're all quite similar, where the classic Liandry's one is pretty much the best, most popular option, with all other variations featuring literally the same legendary items. All AP Shaco builds are very similar, except for the Mythics, which, depending on where you play and what you play against, will also change your playstyle. Ultimately, this video really made me realize that all builds try to achieve the same thing, albeit throughout slightly different methods. Here are all the build types. The one-shot builds featuring Galeforce, Duskblade and Prowler, while the anti-tank builds are the Kraken, Trinity, Eclipse and even Divine Sunderer. The Kraken and Trinity are insanely similar, where the Trinity sacrifices damage for mobility and tankiness. Also for split pushing capabilities, but I won't get into that. While Eclipse and Divine Sunderer sacrifice DPS for burst damage and sustain, again trying to achieve the same goal throughout slightly different methods. Then there are the Bruiser builds, like Goredrinker and Stridebreaker, which both have two versions, with the crit one being stronger and more popular. Again, each doing the same thing. You're tankier early to counter other assassins and have enough burst damage to survive until the late game, where you scale with crit and solo carry. Or go for the tankier items and feel the Bruiser role, where you have more sustain and so on. But just look at all these builds, because they all have the same legendary items, aka either Essence, Bork, Lord Dominic's, Collector or Infinity Age. They all try to do the same fucking thing, and the same goes for the AP builds, except here with even more limited options. I mean, there's no AP build that doesn't have Cosmic Drive and Liandry's that can rival the synergy between these two items. All builds are slight variations of the main one that adapt to both the meta and the enemy team comp. Lastly, I'll be ranking all builds from best to please don't ban me. The fairest ranking here is the one where I'm considering the meta, the average enemy team comp, and ultimately I'll ignore any personal preference in order to hopefully create an accurate list. The best Shaco build would probably be the one where you go for a Mythic only later in the game, and start with the Essence River into Collector and Lord Dominic's. This is the strongest because, as mentioned earlier, it's insanely flexible, thus it can be adapted to whatever you are against in order to solo carry. No bias whatsoever in choosing this build as number one. Next is likely the Goredrinker build, which seems to be the meta now. This build has the power to counter and resist being one-shotted, while after Essence River and Collector, you can one-shot anyone yourself. Next would be the Eclipse build. It's been the most consistent build out there. It works against any enemy team comp and has survived the test of time in the ever-changing meta. Then there is the Duskblade and Prowler slow build. These two have different playstyles, but because of the similar build path and performance, I will rank them together. Although, if I were to choose one, I would go for the Claw as it has more power early, while for most people I believe Duskblade would work better with its multi-kill and teamfight. Next we have Divine Sunderer. Decent build, but the problem is that, just like the Trinity Force, it tries to do too much at the same time and ends up being weaker late game when compared to a proper full crit build. Lastly, something more situational that also has a really weak early game is the Kraken build. In the right situation, it can be by far the best build because of its potential to 1v1 any tank and solo carry. Yet it has a big problem, that being the Kraken can be adapted in the no mythic build, thus rendering the Bork into Kraken first really situational. Wait a second, I'm forgetting something, am I not? Ah yes. Please don't play with this build, I'm saying that for your own sake. I mean, no one asked for an AD support Shaco build to begin with. Just play with Lux if you're that guy, or at least play him AP. Which brings us on to the AP builds. Now, I didn't want to rank them together with the other builds, as it would be like comparing apples to oranges, but this is the ranking order of all AP Shaco builds, where I believe that right now even the support one is better than Luden's and Night Harvester. And if I were to rank the classic best AP Shaco build somewhere with all the other builds, it would be a solid third place. And that's mainly because even though AP Shaco suffers from not being only harder to play, easier to counter, and having some really one-dimensional itemizations, because of the meta, AP can work really well in the right hands and matchup. Anyways, here's the complete list of all builds. Also in the upper right corner, you'll find a playlist including all the build guides I did, if you're interested in more in-depth analysis. Anyways, that's it. That's the guide. If you guys want to share with me your own tier lists, I have created a custom template on the tier maker website just for you. So you can simply follow the link in the description and pinned comment in order to make your own tier list. And if you have any questions, you can always join my Discord server or just send me a personal message. Again, links in the description down below. Nonetheless, if you enjoy my content and want to support my work, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe and so on. Either way, thanks a lot for watching, and as always until next time, stay safe. Well, you thought I forgot about the tank build. That build goes here, in the pits of fucking hell.
What the fuck, man?
Oh fuck, Morty.